So looking forward to an opportunity to spend some time with Sheryl Attkisson, and we have that opportunity right now. She's on the line. The book, Stonewalled, My Fight for Truth Against the Forces of Obstruction, Intimidation, and Harassment in Obama's Washington. You can pre-order that book right now, and you'd be smart to do so as well. Sheryl, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you. I might mention that a big chunk of the proceeds is going to the Brechner Center for Freedom of Information for open government causes.
Outstanding. And I just saw a second ago, if you'd like, you could even get an autograph copy.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. You can go to my website, SherylAttkisson.com, and there's a page with details if you're interested.
Yeah, buy 10 or 12 of them. They make great gifts for friends, too.
Well, and just in time for Christmas, as they say.
Absolutely. We'll kind of circle back to some of the stuff that you cover in Stonewalled, but you're doing some work at SherylAttkisson.com now, and also doing work for the Daily Signal, with the Daily Signal, which is a fantastic new website, about a year old or so, and a huge story this week on a Benghazi bombshell, alleged document review and destruction. You talked to a guy that said he saw it happen personally. What's the story here?
Well, let me be clear. He didn't say he saw destruction of documents.
Right.
He simply reports an incident. As the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, he's not a low-level person. He's well-reputed, well-regarded, 21-year Foreign Service officer, former Obama contributor, supporter, former military Navy officer. And he found out or heard about a document session that was occurring, he says, on a weekend after a call for documents from the Accountability Review Board. And the documents would be coming from his office. He was over something called Maghreb Affairs, which includes Libya. So he decided to stop in, and he says he came in on a Sunday afternoon and to this room underneath the jogger's entrance, which he describes as sort of an operations center at the State Department headquarters in the basement. And one of his employees, an office director, was there, somebody he describes as close to the 7th floor, which is Hillary Clinton and her associates. This person had supposedly been assigned up there previously. And she told Raymond Maxwell, this Deputy Assistant Secretary, according to him, we are to separate out any documents that could be embarrassing or damaging to the 7th floor. And Ray Maxwell he said, but isn't that unethical? And she replied, Ray, those are our orders. And then he further says that after spending a few minutes there, in walked Secretary of State Clinton's Chief of Staff, Sheryl Mills, and Deputy Chief of Staff, Jake Sullivan, who briefly acknowledged him, spoke to him, and he says appeared to be checking and, see what's going on, overseeing, and then they left. He left a short time later after going through some papers himself, he says, in a small adjacent office off of this operations center with the office director and an intern.
And I thought one of the intriguing things in your piece as well is somebody who was under his supervision, one of his people, sitting there doing work that he didn't realize that she'd been asked to do.
He overheard it, and he asked her on the Friday before, he says, kind of what was going on, and she explained where she would be, and that's how he decided to stop in. But he says that was not uncommon. He describes himself as sort of a figurehead in the office, somebody who was often worked around.
And Raymond, Sheryl, was actually disciplined for the security lapses leading up to the attacks, but he was later cleared, but he was one of those 4 guys. He says scapegoated, not just singled out, but scapegoated for this discipline.
Yes, there were 4 officials named by Hillary Clinton specifically as faulting in somehow in the security lapses that occurred leading up to the Benghazi attacks. Maxwell and his associates, at the State Department that I know, other sources say he had nothing to do with security. And while he was on leave, he was on paid leave, and he wanted to appeal this charge, but they actually never charged him with anything, so there was nothing to appeal. So there he sat in limbo on paid leave for a year. And at the end of the year, they brought him back, cleared him of anything that he might have done wrong, and put him back on the job. And he had been eligible for retirement. He went ahead and retired after he came back. So, he doesn't know if that whole episode has anything to do with him showing up in that room.
Mm-hmm.
He does wonder in retrospect if some of these things might be connected, but he really has no idea.
And he's been interviewed by some members of Congress as well on this one. I see that you've written private interviews. Will it be part of something you will hear testimony on?
Well, it's good to clear up a misconception. A lot of people are talking about the story without actually reading the article or knowing much about it. But I think Congressman Cummings, who's the Democrat in charge of Oversight Committee, who his job is to dispel things like this on behalf of the administration. And he put out a statement that said, or issued a comment that said, well, Ray Maxwell never told us this when we had him in here at the Oversight Committee. And that may be true, but Ray Maxwell did report this to Congress. People have mistakenly said, gee, he didn't report it like he said he did, and is he telling the truth? Well, yes, there are notes and there's documentation for it. He spoke to Oversight Republicans, Jason Chaffetz and Trey Gowdy and staff some months ago and recounted the story, but did not want to be out front, did not want to have his name associated with it. He had family and job concerns at the time, did not particularly want to even testify about it, although if called, I believe would do so truthfully. So Congress has had the information, at least the Republicans working on the Benghazi issue. And whether or not they'll do something with it now, I haven't spoken personally with Congressman Gowdy, but I saw in an interview he said that they have been pursuing this and that they intended to look into it. So I suspect perhaps after the election, when the Benghazi Committee continues its work, there might be testimony from him, private / and or public.
Sheryl Attkisson with us. Riley and Scott here on WROK. SherylAttkisson.com is her website, and her Benghazi piece at the Daily Signal, or at dailysignal.com, I should say. The opening yesterday, the first hearing of the special committee on Benghazi. You've been following this closer than anybody else. What kind of answers, what kind of questions do you hope to have answered, I should say, during this special committee? Do you think it will be effective?
The main thing I saw out of yesterday's hearing, which was to look at recommendations for security and whether they've been implemented, the thing that struck me was the State Department security official saying that the number one most important recommended security measure that was supposed to be done, according to the Best Practices Committee, and they said all the other security fixes hinged on this one being done, has not been done, and they have no intention of doing it. It's creating an undersecretary for security, basically elevating that office so that it has a greater authority and greater perception within the State Department. And apparently this has been a recommendation that has come from other boards in the past, since 1999, and the State Department refuses to do it. The security official just said it's not needed. I have good access to the Secretary of State. Well, it hasn't worked out so well. Why? I don't know why the State Department thinks it should reject the number one most important recommendation from the experts, especially when there won't always be the same people in office. Maybe there is good access now and a good understanding of what happened. But 5 years down the road, things may be different. The Dar es Salaam East Africa bombings that happened in the 90s, there were many repeats of denied security requests, ignored warnings, many similar same stories, and same people at the State Department involved in the Benghazi attack. So if they haven't been able to fix it, I'm not sure under what basis they decide to reject the number one most important recommendation. That's what struck me. I don't want to blather on, but if you want me to, I can answer your second question about
absolutely.
What could come of it. I think so much time has passed. It's more difficult to get at the truth once people have had the chance to chew on it, and there have been so many evolutions of stories and things that were so contradictory, they're trying to come together, even though stories are entirely opposite that they were on the government's part from when Benghazi first happened. They've evolved to these new stories. And I just think it's very difficult to get documents and get at the truth when 2 years have gone by, as time passes. So I do think one service that this committee will be able to do is to take all the conflicting stories that have dribbled out over time and all the documents and put it together into sort of a cohesive story. And I also think they'll be able to ask President Obama, in writing if nothing else, to describe what he did that night of the attack, since they've kept that such a closely held secret, even though he's our commander-in-chief in charge when our Americans were under attack on foreign soil.
Sheryl Attkisson with us here. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. Also want to point people to a brand new story this morning that just saw at dailysignal.com on healthcare.gov, the Obamacare website, and security risks. Personal information, sensitive personal information being at risk. And there were warnings. There were prior warnings about this, and the administration, the higher-ups pushed ahead with it anyway, right?
Yeah, healthcare.gov pushed ahead with it anyway. And I reported on this fairly extensively for CBS News, and the Obama administration, Democrats in Congress, and the Hillary Clinton Obama Front Group Media Matters tried very hard to push back and say there were no security concerns, but all my information had come from insiders who knew of these concerns. It was very well documented. And this further confirms the security risks that they moved ahead with healthcare.gov, despite the fact that their own chief information person had said it should not launch, it was not safe, she would not sign off on the papers. There are email exchanges that the Oversight Committee is releasing that talk about employees inside healthcare.gov speaking of a cover-up of the security issues and basically people wanting to stick their head in the sand and not address them. The GAO says this puts personal information of people at risk currently on healthcare.gov, and that was always a concern. So they've validated that concern and issued some recommendations.
I love the quote, and I am tired of the cover-ups. Boy, that's a line that could be applied to so many different things, including that topic.
Well, you know, somebody wishes she hadn't emailed that.
Sheryl Attkisson with us here. Just another minute or two, if you could, Sheryl. I want to spend a little time on the book, Stonewalled, which is coming up in November. You can find more and also pre-order at your website, SherylAttkisson.com. But it's, as the subhead says, this a tale about you trying to do your job in Washington. You've been at it 30 years, investigative journalism, both Republican and Democratic administrations, and things kind of got weird a few years ago with what you were doing on Fast and Furious, what you were doing on Benghazi. What kind of roadblocks were you running into at that time?
Well, there's a complex set of factors at play, especially in the past couple of years. There is an administration that everybody hoped would be, transparent and promised, gave new promise that we were going to be able to have access to public information that proved to be quite the opposite, and yet still had a great deal of ideological support among some people within the network, and that's never been a problem. Everybody's got their opinions, and you just keep them out of your reporting, but it became very difficult for some people, in my opinion, at CBS, not all of them, not even most of them, but for key people to keep their ideological views out of the reporting, and they use that to, in my view, censor topics lest the public hear of them and draw the wrong conclusion. I mean, it's not that they wanted both sides told. Of course, both sides should be told in a story. They just didn't want a topic covered at all. In my view, that's sort of censorship for the media to pretend a subject of interest, of public interest, isn't happening and just refusing to cover it. And so there are also, the book addresses increasing well-orchestrated, well-financed campaigns. It's a cottage industry in Washington now to impact the news media by bloggers and things that look to be grassroots but are actually AstroTurf paid efforts by surrogates to spin the news, put out false information, call networks and try to controversialize a story or reporters to scare them away. There are advertiser influence interests, economic interests that are keeping stories from being covered. And it's sort of a mess. And it's happening not just at, where I worked. I think it's happening, and we talk about this in the book as well, because I had some peers willing to speak of it and give some anecdotes. It's happening across the board.
Well, and the fact that you talk about electronically surveilled while digging in, and I remember that those stories came down about supposedly they were in your computer.
Yes, I mean, on the advice of my attorney, I haven't spoken publicly about much of that, except to say that several different independent teams have confirmed the same thing. There were remote access by highly sophisticated entities to my personal computer and my laptop computer. And to the extent that my attorney is allowing me to talk about it, that is in the book as well. It recounts the trail that we went through in which we discovered this, and some of the reason we had good sources that explained it, how the forensics teams took a look at what happened. And it's pretty chilling, I have to say. It's sort of, in my view, that's inexcusable in America, what happened. But a lot of things that are going on with this restrictions of press freedom, and not just by this administration, but in general with the federal government clampdown on thinking it owns information that actually we own, is just not like it's supposed to be.
She is outstanding reporter Sheryl Attkisson. The book Stonewalled, My Fight for Truth Against the Forces of Obstruction, Intimidation, and Harassment in Obama's Washington. Ready for pre-order. Go to her website and do that. You might want to get an autographed copy as well. Follow her work at the Daily Signal. Listen, if she writes it, read it. You'll enjoy it and you'll learn something from it. Sheryl, thanks for taking time out of your day for us.